More than in any other recent conflict, the Second World War brought misery not just to the armed combatants, but also to civilian populations. And among those that suffered most were the people of Coventry. Their city was the target of bombing raids throughout the war, but November 1940, known as the Coventry Blitz, saw attacks of the greatest ferocity, leading to the highest casualties. The German code name for the attack was Moonlight Sonata. This was chosen because the raids were planned for clear moonlit nights that would give the bombers best visibility for finding their targets, and at the same time minimize the threat from British fighter planes and anti-aircraft fire. The worst night, the 14th of November, was clear and with a full moon, ideal conditions for the 449 bombers that, according to the Nazi claims, dropped 30,000 incendiaries and 500 tons of high explosives onto Coventry. On that night, over 500 civilians died. The exact figures will never be known, as many bodies could not be recovered from the remains of the collapsed and burning buildings. Those who survived the Blitz also suffered, many still being seriously affected more than 60 years later. These are some of their recollections.
On that particular night, November the 10th, it was a frosty night, cold, but very, very clear. And I had the lone bomber come over, straight over, top of Airshill Common. Within half an hour later, I went out to the front, put my home guard coat on. I said, "Look down the road, you'll see what's happened." The Elvis was all on fire. Bloody great flame, sheet of flames it was.
Well, Phyllis Smith was my brother-in-law's sister, and Arthur Smith was my brother-in-law's father. They were both killed in the air raid shelter, Phyllis was, at the age of 28. And Arthur Smith was dug from the rubble in the shelter, taken to Coventry and Warwickshire Hospital by ambulance, but unfortunately a bomb dropped on the ambulance, which was a direct hit, and killed all the crew and Arthur Smith at the age of 60.
It was good fortune that I am here today, because at the height of the Blitz, my father, in his wisdom, decided that the safest place for us to be during the raids was under the stairs. We were offered air raid shelters from various people, like Anderson shelters for the garden, which was just simply a corrugated arch with soil on top. Really, it was a very fortunate decision by my father, because lying under the stairs, we heard the bomb come down and demolish half the house and the garden complete. If we'd had this Anderson shelter, I wouldn't be here today.
I was 18 when the Blitz started, and that night it was just as though the German bombers was following us home. So from then on we never went out again. We went to the shelters practically every night. My dad and me, we used to get ready, all our old clothes on, shut the dog in the cupboard, and we'd go down the shelter. That was every night of the week. We did that for weeks and weeks. And then the November Blitz, we were in the shelter, and it was like there's hundreds of planes going over. We stood outside watching them going over. The planes going over. And we kept saying, somebody's going to get it today, somebody's going to get it. And of course it was us, we got it. And somebody came down and she said to me, "It's no good you going up," she said, "your house is completely gone." Well, we just didn't believe her. And when we got up, we just didn't know where it was, because everything, it was as though the bomb had started at the top and gone all the way down. And we started to look for the dog, because we'd shut her in the house, but we couldn't find her. We just had nothing. Everything was gone in the bombing.
June, my 12-year-old sister at that time, was having piano lessons with two maiden ladies who begged her to stay with them.
in their Morrison shelter. But June came home, how we don't know, in the middle of a heavy blitz, and yet the two ladies died from a direct hit.
And the lone aircraft kept coming over, not in droves, in ones, and they were selecting the targets. They got the women in the shelter, all the ladies and the women in the shelter, and the men was out on patrol. And at 1:30, Mr. Tilley came to me. He said, "I better go back home, Arthur." He says, "and have a look, see if the wife's all right." We went back from Bristol Road to Broomfield Road, and the house had gone, and the shop next door. Christ almighty, said, "We better try and move some of the rubble." Couldn't do it. He found her dead under the staircase.
I was about 9 years old at the time of the Blitz, and one particular story which stands out very much in my mind was the night that a landmine dropped in the allotments at the rear of the houses, and all of a sudden there was this tremendous explosion, and the blast sent all the glass from the back kitchen in over Dad and the next door neighbour. He was pulling bits of glass from his coat pocket for months afterwards. The blast also took the top half of the door between the kitchen and the front room halfway up, and we never did find the top half.
In 1940 I was 11 years old. I was in the house with my mum, my dad, my sister, and we received a direct hit by a bomb. We were buried, and I woke up trying to claw at the rubble that was all around me, horrible smell in my mouth, and horrible. And to this day I can't go by a derelict building without I smell this awful smell. I was trying to shout, and I heard my father say, "That's my little nipper." And that was the last words I ever heard him say. He died during the night from his injuries. My lovely mum didn't survive the burial. She was dead when they rescued her. I don't know how long I was buried, quite a long while I think, because I had to tunnel in and drag me out because my legs were broken, and every time they tried to uncover me, everything was falling in again on top of us. Eventually they did tunnel in and drag me out. It was wonderful to just see all the black faces of the rescuers, the tin helmets and the black faces of them, and such a relief. And it was so funny. To this day I remember saying to them, "Don't dirty my hair, I've just had it washed." Kept asking where my mum and dad were, and I wasn't told for quite a long time. And of course when I did, it was a big shock. 11 years old, no mum, no dad.
On November the 14th, 1940, I was aged 14 when the landmine landed on the substation next door to the bungalow near the Daimler Works. There was a flash of light, and that's basically all I can remember. Before the results of the blast had produced their damage on the bungalow. And as far as I was concerned, it was oblivion, or it was the end of the world. My mother was sitting next to me, and unfortunately she was killed after the landmine exploded.
At the particular time, the army had been forced to leave France, and they brought no equipment back with them, see? And they'd put these men on guard duty in Coventry. And what was they doing? Helping themselves out of jewellers' shops, rings. That's the way it goes.
Dear Sir, I'm sending you back these coins which I've carried around in my possession since 1941. I was sent to Coventry to do demolition and clearance work after the heavy raids with the army. It was while we were working on the fruit and vegetable market that I came across these coins in an OXO tin. I realise now how indifferent I was to the suffering and loss of your city of Coventry, when I was there amongst the ruins of buildings. To search for buried goods was more concern to us than the keeping of fatherless children and the deep mourning of a stricken city. I realise in myself how far short I came to what I should be. I will sign myself a repented sinner.
There was a tremendous roar, and as we looked round, we saw a high Uncle 111 flying up Beak Avenue. It could have only been about 400 foot, and Mum grabbed us all into the hedge because we'd heard stories of German aircrew firing at civilians. This he didn't do. The plane must have only been about 500 foot, and it roared off up the street, and then there was this almighty crash, and the sky lit up in front of us, and this plane had dropped all its bombs on Wallace Road, Radford. And one of the kids who lived in that street next morning came to school, and he'd got blobs of white all over his hair. It had changed colour.
And when I got past where the new cathedral is now, to the old cathedral, I couldn't walk on the pavements. They was red hot. And the fire hoses were all laying strewn all over the place, flat, no water.
A thing with incendiary bombs, which the Germans dropped quite a lot of, one dropped through the roof of a house further up the road, straight into the bath. And with the heat, which was tremendous, it welded itself to the bath, and the lady and the gentleman from that house had baths with the incendiary bomb for many years afterwards, till it was replaced.
What upset me most was during the big raid on Coventry, the number of people, men and women, pouring up Broomfield Road, because it's a long climb, to get to Tolhill Woods. They thought by getting into the woods they'd be protected. And they were carrying blankets and wheeling chairs full of blankets into the woods.
Our worst sight was the Warden's Post opposite Old Church Road in Posel Road, which was it was a nerve centre for the area. All wardens and personnel there were killed. We worked there all day clearing the bodies up till the evening. When Mr. Jewison, who was in charge of the depot, refused to take any more, we had to get inside the mortuary and pick the bodies up and lace them over each other to get the bodies in. A chap, he was a warden, we had a shower of incendiary bombs come, and they all dropped down, and he heard them coming. He ducked, and as he went down, one got underneath him and it exploded and blew him apart. And then we had to pick the bits up and get them back in the depot.
In addition to the members of the armed forces who died defending Coventry, 5,500 families were evacuated, but many others chose to remain. The raids in November 1940 alone destroyed an estimated 35% of Coventry's buildings. Throughout the Second World War, over 2,000 of Coventry's citizens were killed by enemy action. Many died far away in the armed forces, and others in Coventry's civil defence, some as young as 14. The majority, however, were civilians who died either in their homes or workplaces, or while seeking safety in air raid shelters.
That's the day I can remember when it never goes out of my mind. It's with me night and day.
Sometime later my brother Vernon arrived home from work, and he was covered with human remains. He'd been taking shelter in an alleyway opposite a bus queue on which a bomb had dropped. Vernon was never the same again.